Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back with another book review. And today we're going to be reviewing another gargantuan Stephen King novel. We are going to be taking a look at Stephen King's The Stand, another Dark Tower-ish novel. But we're going to be talking about The Stand on its own merit. Now this is the original version of The Stand. This book was published in 1978, and the original version of The Stand clocks in at about 823 pages. 1991, Stephen King decided to revisit The Stand again, so then we got Stand, the complete and uncut version, where Stephen King added about 500 pages of manuscript back into the book. This was published in 1991, and this version clocks in at 1,141 pages. So you can see it's significantly larger and longer than the original. For this purpose of this review, we're going to be reviewing the full, complete, and uncut version of The Stand. I've read this book a bunch of times. I haven't read it as much as it, but I have read it quite often. So as part of the 500 pages that Stephen King added to this manuscript, he added a new beginning. He added a new ending. He expanded a lot of scenes. He updated the book's time period. This book originally took place in 1978 and in the 80s. This takes place in the 90s. So he updated a lot of the cultural references, a lot of the world events, a lot of what was going on at the time that the Captain Trips, the super flu, would have hit America. And he went through and he did some editing and cleaned up some areas, made it all flow better, made extensions to some scenes, added some bits and whatnot. I've never actually read both versions back to back to see exactly what he changed. That's a lot of reading, and that's maybe a gross overindulgence. And maybe someday when I'm really bored, I'll tackle the 2,000 or plus pages that it would take to do that. But I'm not quite there yet. So, the story of The Stand, very simple. Superflu, that is aptly named Captain Trips in the book, wipes out about 99% of the population of America. We assume it's 99% of the population worldwide, but the book really only focuses on the states. And then after civilization collapses, the 1% that's left over, the survivors, are basically divided into two camps. The good camp, which is led by Mother Abigail, and is stationed in Colorado. And the evil camp, which is led by everybody's favorite villain, Randall Flagg, and they're stationed out of Las Vegas, Nevada. So after the apocalypse, the remaining survivors are divvied up into two camps, the good camp and the bad camp, the Mother Abigail camp and the Randall Flagg camp, where eventually at the end of the book, there is a final showdown between good and evil. There is a final stand, if you will, between good and evil when the good guys go against Randall Flagg's bad guys, and the evil is vanquished, and the world moves on. World moves on. You see what I did there? And so it's a fairly simple story, and it's a very well written story. And a lot of people have complained and criticized Stephen King for being too wordy, for his books being too bloated. And I told you in my review on it that I didn't think it was bloated. I didn't think it was too wordy. I think it was as long as it needed to be to tell the story that it needed. In the case of The Stand, the criticism of King's work being too bloaty is almost justified. I do think this book is a bit long. I do think this book is a bit needlessly long. I do think it is a bit wordy. And I think, adding the 500 pages back into the book, I think some of it needed to be added in. I don't know if all of it needed to be in. The first third of the book when Captain Trips is exploding across America and people are dying and the survivors all over the country are sort of banding together trying to figure out what's going on. That part of the book, that book is awesome. It's filled with a lot of action. I mean, King gets to wipe out the population of the country, so that's always exciting to read that type of apocalyptic fiction. And the first third of the book works really well. The last third of the book works really well, where the good guys are finally making their final stand against Randall Flagg, and they're off to Vegas, and there's the big climactic battle, which does involve an atom bomb, and pretty much Las Vegas gets destroyed, and I'm pretty sure most of the Western Seaboard is obliterated in that. The last third of the book is good and action packed and well written. The middle third gets a bit draggy. The middle third does slow down a bit when everybody's getting to Colorado and when everybody's getting to Las Vegas and when the action is starting to slow down and when King is trying to rebuild civilization, when they start building the boulder free zone in Colorado and they start rebuilding the country, they start rebuilding the world, they start getting back to the mundane and the minutia of what it was like before the apocalypse. That's where the book drags. The middle section of the book, the middle third of the book, is where the book almost collapses under the weight of its own bulk. That's where it tends to get a little draggy. And when you get to the middle of it, it can be a bit of a slog fest to read through to get to that last third. And it's only after Stephen King destroys and blows up the Boulder Free Zone that the action starts to pick up again, and we get to the final climactic battle. So, yes, I think this book is a bit wordy. I think this book is a bit bloated. I think this book could still be trimmed down by a couple 100 pages or so to make it tighter, to make it less sloggy in the middle. You know, maybe some of the scenes were extended too long. Some of of what was going on was just extended too long. The book takes place over a long period of time. I think it takes place over a year or two. I mean, there's months and months where the book is taking place. It's covering a large segment of time. So, and you can really feel that when you're reading through it, especially when you get to the sloggy parts. You start to feel that, okay, they're covering a lot of time and they're doing it in a lot of words and a lot of bloat. If there is one thing that Stephen King is good at, and he's always good at it, and he's good at it no matter what book he writes, it's characterization. And this book has a tremendous amount of characters and characterization in it. Stephen King is awesome at writing about the everyman, the blue-collar man, the everyday man, the ordinary people that you sort of meet. He's so good at doing that. The characters that he writes in all of his books just sort of come alive, and you can relate to them. And just like in It, the characters in The Stand are so memorable. They're so good. Characters like Stu Redman, who's from East Texas. I mean, they call him East Texas, the whole book. Franny Goldsmith, some of the characters. Tom Cullen. Tom Cullen is a character. He's he's on the good guy team, but he's sort of a slow, he's a slow adult. He has some developmental disabilities, but his character is so lovable and so well written, and he's just so fun and neat to read about. And then you've got the people on this book features some of the best villains that Stephen King has written. Randall Flagg, obviously, is most everybody's favorite villain. And this is the book where he is fleshed out the most, even more so than in The Tower. This is the book where you really get to see Flagg at his most manipulative, at his most evil, at his most vile. And it's good. The character of Flagg is so well written, so well fleshed out. He's such an evil entity that it's so great. And this book has one of my all-time favorite characters in it, and that's Trash Can Man. Trash Can Man in this book is such an awesome character. Trash Can Man was another person I suspect that might have had some developmental disabilities, but he's a firebug. And before the apocalypse, he was a firebug. And he was in and out of, I guess, jail and prison and whatnot for setting fires. He would set fires to things, and he was just this crazy shithouse rat firebug. And then after the apocalypse, he sort of latched on to Randall Flagg, and he didn't become Randall Flagg's right-hand man. That was more Lloyd Henry's role, but he became sort of the wild card in Flagg's bunch. And there's so many good scenes in here that Trash Can Man has. And they call him Trash Can Man because he used to set fires and cherry bombs and whatnot into people's trash cans, and he'd set fire and he'd run off and whatnot. There's a great scene in here at the beginning when you first meet Trash Can Man where he's in Indiana after the apocalypse, and he gets to these big tanks full of, I think it's propane or gasoline or whatever, gets to these big holding tanks, and for him being a firebug, it's like the mecca of all fire that he could find. And there's this whole sequence of events where he basically climbs these things and sets this entire plant on fire. And it's so well written, it's so great, and his dialogue is awesome, and just him, screaming "My life for you" as he's going for Flagg and all that. He's a very simple person. He's very one-minded, and you can tell that he really wants to please Flagg. But in the end, at the end of the book, he's the one that brings the A-bomb. He's the one that brings the A-bomb to Las Vegas, the bomb that eventually is what destroys Las Vegas. So Trash Can Man is what actually destroys all of Flagg's workings. And you can't actually feel bad for the guy because he's just trying to bring Flagg a present. He comes back, he went off and he found an A-bomb, which is the big fire. He calls it the big fire that he found for Flagg. He just wants to give Flagg a present, and he doesn't realize that is dangerous. He doesn't realize actually what he has, and all the people in Vegas telling him, no trash, take it away. Take it away is dangerous, and he's just trying to bring Flagg a present, and of course that is ultimately the downfall of what destroys Flagg's group. There are so many awesome characters in this book, and there's a large cast of characters. There are a lot of people that King is juggling and writing about in the books. And they all have distinct personalities. They're all well written. They're all just fun to read and watch and see how they deal with this crazy ass demigod in Vegas. So I would highly recommend you reading this because this is another epic book that King has given us. This was put out at a time, 1978, when apocalyptic fiction wasn't a big thing. Nowadays, we have all kinds of apocalyptic fiction. We've got dystopia fiction. We got all kinds of stories and what if and what happens when the world ends. All from the Terminator to the Matrix to all kinds of zombie apocalyptic fiction and The Walking Dead. We are inundated with this idea of what will happen when the world ends. But in 1978, when this book first came out, I'm not sure anybody had tackled that before. King might have been one of the first to actually tackle the apocalyptic fiction and what happens at the end of the world. And maybe the end of the world isn't the end of the world. Maybe the end of the world is just the beginning. What if there are worse things that happen after civilization collapses? And all the all the questions that we had about civilization and what civilization means and what happens when there is no civilization, when there's chaos, when there are no rules, when there are no laws, when it is just you versus nature and other people. And King answers that question. He might have been one of the first ones to actually write about that. I'm not sure, but I do know that apocalyptic fiction in the 70s, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So he was really pioneering something back then with this type of work. And it shows. It shows that, and he tackled it really well. And it really is a good read. If you get past the middle sloggy part, the part where it gets a little draggy, if you can get through that and kind of push through that and get and read the rest of it, I think you will enjoy the book. Still holds up the test of time. This was written in 1970. This was written 35 years ago or so. And then the book in 1991 came out. And then this is an older book, but it still stands up to the test of time. 4 out of 5 stars. I'm going to knock a star off because I do think it's bloated. I do think there are parts that could have been trimmed. But the characters in this book, so vivid, so well done, so larger than life, and you root for people you didn't think you would root for. The story is simple, but it's very epic. It's very biblical. It's very epic. It's like a fable, like a giant biblical fable, like a story that cultures have about how the world is going to end and what's going to happen. There's an epicness to the story. It's like a morality tale of what humanity is and what it can do to itself, but also what humanity can become if it's allowed to grow and get rid of all the crap that's slogging it down, like, the greed and all the bad things about humanity. If you can slog that away and let humanity grow a little purer, you might have a different civilization. So, it's very much also a morality tale in its own right, a fable, a parable, if you will, a parable about good and evil, and, the inherent characteristics of humanity. Is humanity basically good? Is humanity basically evil? Are we doomed to kill ourselves at the end of the world? Or can we actually survive and make something better than what we have? Those are the questions that King asks and answers to a degree in this book, in The Stand. And I still think you ought to read it, even though it gets a little draggy. 4 out of 5 stars for The Stand. It's certainly well worth your time to read it. And that is my review of Stephen King's The Stand. It is an awesome book. If you like the review, click the subscribe button, click the like button, share the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, share it with your neighbors, share it with your neighbors' dogs if they have their own YouTube account. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next review.